Today, we're going to test out Ohuhu's new brush tip marker, the Honolulu Plus series. I'll be comparing the new brush tip with the old version, and we will take a look at how it compares to Copic markers as well. At the end, I will share some tips on which ones might be the best fit for you. A big thank you to Ohuhu for sponsoring today's video. Even though this is a sponsored review, as always, I'll be sharing my honest thoughts with you. The set I have here is a 36 color set. Right now, the Honolulu Plus series comes in two options, a 24 color set and a 36 color set. I went ahead and made color swatches for both sets. Feel free to pause the video here so you can take a closer look. Previously, the brush tip was made of nylon. In the new Supreme brush, it's been upgraded to rubber tip. Compared to the old one, this new tip feels more flexible, softer, and more durable. It gives a really nice bounce while you're drawing. Here is a side-by-side comparison. The new tip is slightly longer than the older one. Here is the Ohuhu new brush tip next to the Copic brush tip. Shape-wise, they look very similar. Here I put all three of them together so you can take a closer look. Let's check out their flexibility. With the older version, you can only bend the brush tip a little bit. But with the new version, you can bend it almost halfway down without applying much pressure. Now here's a Copic brush nib. You can see its flexibility is quite similar to Ohuhu's new brush tip. So how does the new brush tip actually perform? And is it worth the upgrade? First, let's take a look at the brush strokes they create. Here is a side-by-side comparison between the old and new Ohuhu brush tips. Honestly, even though the softness has changed, the shape of the strokes they create can be very similar depends on how you use them. Here is a comparison with the Copic brush tip. They perform very similarly. Now let's try drawing some curved lines. Using a softer tip to draw curved lines feels a bit easier. It gives you more control over the flow and the thickness of your lines. It helps create more dynamic stroke. But again, depending on how you control your hand pressure and speed, I think both the old and new versions can create very similar curved lines. When comparing the new Ohuhu brush tip to the Copic nib for drawing curves, I honestly don't notice much of a difference between the two. Now let's draw some vertical and horizontal lines. It definitely feels a little easier to glide across the paper using the softer tip. Both the new Ohuhu tip and the Copic tip usually create a small hook at the beginning of the stroke because the tip easily bends a bit more. The previous Honolulu tip doesn't really create that hook. Instead, it just leaves a darker mark at the start. Now let's take a look at blending. Will the softer nib make a big difference? I picked two colors from each set and used them to shade a sphere. Compared to the old tip, the new Ohuhu brush nib gives a softer touch. It's easier to draw curves and blend smoothly. As you can see in the beginning stage, the old tip tends to leave more visible brush marks and overlaps. But after you keep blending, those marks pretty much disappear. The final results between the two are very similar. I will share my overall thoughts and advice a little later. let's compare it with Copic. The nib flexibility and blending feel very close between Ohuhu new tip and Copic. I don't really notice a difference. The ink though behave just a tiny bit differently. Copic ink seems to feather out a little more after repeated blending. The ink gets a bit fuzzier. That could actually be helpful for certain drawing effects if you need it. But honestly, the difference is very minimal. And for my drawing style, since I don't usually do heavy blending for super smooth effects, I don't really have a preference. Now let's take a look at all three examples side by side. Honestly, they look quite similar, so you might be wondering which one you should pick. Let me share some of my thoughts and advice while I work on the sketch drawing. When you look at the final result from all three tips, it's hard to see a big difference. That's because how we use our tools, our technique, makes a huge impact too. Some of you might already know from my other tutorials that 99% of the time I actually use chisel tip to draw, so I actually don't have much experience with brush nibs. However, in one of my older tutorials where I showed how to draw an eye, I did two versions, one using only the brush tips and one using only the chisel tips. As you can see here, the final results looked very similar and both turned out very well. So if you already have a lot of experience with markers, no matter which nib you use, you might be able to create very similar results. For beginners who are still getting used to markers, the types of nib can make a bigger difference. I think the newer version of the brush tip can really benefit beginners, especially for blending. It's easier to glide across a paper, and it creates softer blends. It can also help with adding intricate details, especially if you like working in a more realistic art style. Of course, depending on your personal art style, you might prefer different nib softness. There is really no one-size-fits-all. For me personally, since I mostly use chisel tips, and my art style is pretty loose and not realistic, I don't really have a strong preference for brush tip softness. If you are trying to decide between the older and the newer version of Ohuhu brush tips, I would say it really comes down to your drawing style and what feels most comfortable for you. The newer version has a softer, more flexible tip, which makes it easier to create smooth, dynamic lines and blends color gently. If you enjoy doing lots of blending, curving lines, or working on realistic drawings that need more subtle details, you might like the new brush tip more. I think it can be beginner-friendly because it's more forgiving when you are still getting used to controlling hand pressure. On the other hand, if you already feel comfortable with your current markers, or if you tend to work with faster, looser strokes where precision isn't as critical, the previous version still performs very well. In the final result, the difference can be pretty minimal. While the final results can look very similar, the difference is much more noticeable while you are actually drawing. At the end of the day, both versions are capable of creating beautiful results. It just depends on what kind of drawing experience you enjoy the most. I'm not sure if Ohuhu plans to expand the color range for the Honolulu Plus series anytime soon. At the moment, they only offer 24 colors and 36 color sets, which I feel may not be quite enough for creating more complex drawings. However, if you're looking to build on your existing marker collection, or just want to try out the new brush tip, these sets can be a great choice. For the rest of the video, I'll be sharing the process of me drawing a cat using the 36 color. I've been practicing a lot lately. This isn't a tutorial, it's more of a casual drawing session that I wanted to share with you. I'm still learning and improving, but I thought it might be fun to bring you along and show a bit of my process. I hope this video is helpful, and thank you so much for taking time to watch. If you have any questions, thoughts, or just want to say hi, feel free to drop a comment below. I'm always happy to hear from you. Take care, I will see you in the next video.